and welcome back to the Noise Filter podcast. This week we have Phillip Drown. Hello, Phillip. How you doing? You all right?
I'm good. How's it going?
Yeah, very good, thank you. So just could you describe for the other people watching what it is that you do?
I am a writer of fiction. That's my passion. It's what I like to do. Mm-hmm. I do have a day job too. I run a record shop. I run 2 record shops, which also keeps me really busy. And I'm also a gigolo just for pocket money. So that's kind of cool. It's nice to have that little bit extra, isn't it?
Yeah,
so,
yeah, a little bit of cash in hand is always good.
Yeah, I think so. But it works though.
Yeah. Well, I've just had the pleasure of reading your book and really enjoyed it. It's The Reputation of Booyah Kafi. And wow, it was great, really good. I mean, you know, it's nice to have someone on that you've just really thoroughly enjoyed their stuff. So yeah, I was really excited just to talk to you about how that kind of got going and sort of what inspired that. So when you were sort of researching that, what things kind of inspired you for that?
Well, it was originally I just wanted to do a rock star story, and so it was just all turning out a little bit too cliched, and so I just did take a little tangent towards the blues thing. I thought no one's really done it. I looked into it, and I think in one William Faulkner book, I think a blues singer turns up at Parchment Farm or something like that, and but there wasn't really anything else that I saw, and I suppose to do a good first book, A Gap in the Market is a good thing to start with. Yeah. So yeah, and I read, so also all those sorts of thoughts were going through my mind. I read an article on blues singer R.L. Burnside, and he was so an international selling musician. He was just living out by the interstate, just in a mobile trailer with 3 generations of his family and dogs in the yard and a bottle of whiskey and standing there in his string vest. And it was just amazing that this guy was just living out there and anyone could drive past him and not know who the hell he is. So that stuck in my mind, and I'd read that article 3 years before even considering doing the novel, but it always stuck in my mind. So he was sort of, it's not based on him in any way at all, but it was just, I like that idea, international selling musician.
Yeah.
Living by the road.
Yeah, it was good. Yeah, it's very good. It's a sort of really I don't know how to describe how it sort of made me feel, but it's really beautifully descriptive. Even like the first page was just this incredibly just really beautiful way of sort of just have a very descriptive way with words. I don't have that descriptive way with words when I'm trying to describe how, but it was very evocative, and it had for a first book, I didn't read it like it was somebody who was writing their first book. Is that like when you write your first book, is there a lot of pressure to kind of just have this super, like, because you don't know what you're going to do, you don't know what the end will be, so is there a lot of pressure to kind of make it this amazing polished super thing?
Well, I suppose there's always the pressure of doing that because you're putting your name to something, you want it to be good.
Yeah. But
there's a little secret I'll let you into, which is that it was the second book. So I did a trial run, and I mean that's a finished novel, needs a lot of work on it. But yeah, with the description thing, so it's just it was just the way I found that I wrote. Yeah. And I mean that first chapter, the opening, the first few chapters, I had to strip a lot back because I tended to, you don't have to describe every damn thing that he's doing, like him. So, but it just came quite simply. Maybe you said, if you were to start trying to write, then you'd find that actually you'd find your own way of doing things too.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and it just, I don't know, it just came simply. And
it's interesting, isn't it, when you hear what your own voice is on paper? That's quite an interesting sort of, that's an interesting thing for me. I personally would love to do some writing, and it's always sort of put me off because it just feels like this, as I was saying earlier, like this real monumental task with which there's such a high yardstick to sort of measure up to. I don't know how you sort of get even how that even begins.
Well, it's more about you just have to be proud of it when you're finished. Once
Yeah.
you're doing it, you're not thinking of that at all, or
No.
I wasn't really. And in terms of visualizing, so I mean, a lot of I dreamt about that first chapter. I thought about it for a long, long time, and I did have the ending, so I knew where it was going to. It
Yeah.
was just sort of filling in, like any good story song as well. It's kind of filling in the blanks. So all that massive space in between the covers. So yeah, it was just quite simple, really. But yeah, with the detailed description, I have been told to sort of rein it in a bit, but then that sort of is losing my voice. So I would overrule that. Anyone tells me to rein it in,
Yeah.
then I don't know. It's just what I do.
Yeah.
If you don't really have to read it. So
No. Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I know I loved it. I really loved it, and it was
thank you very
yeah.
much.
Just that opening chapter was just like, for me, was sort of that sold it for me a little bit.
Nice.
And as a story, you know, it was a really fascinating story, and it was full of just lots of these moments for me where I just felt like I just wanted Booyah to have a bit of a break. He just felt like he just
Yeah.
constantly got, you know, the rough end of the stick all the time, and you know, it was a bit heartbreaking for me, to be honest.
Oh, sorry about that.
Yeah.
He's such a nice guy. He's just doing his thing, not causing anyone any harm at all. And it was that was very deliberate. That, you know, he doesn't say a bad word about anyone. People treat him badly. He's not going around doing what we all do, really, and saying he said, she said. He's just getting on with it.
Yeah.
The simple idea behind the story was sort of what it says in the blurb on the back cover. He just wants to go out, play music, have a bit of fun in the meantime. When his eyes are opened up to the world of what goes on in town, because he's lived outside town. I'll be careful about spoilers.
Yeah, that's
so. So he just went into town, and then he was aware of the fact, if you like, whatever, that, you know, it is a big bad world out there, but you've got to immerse yourself, otherwise you just stay outside of everything for the rest of your life, and I don't know, plant seeds and live a pretty boring life. So, which is otherwise what you would have done.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's good. It's very good. What's your background, and how does that impact your sort of choices of the sort of story that you would like to tell?
Well, it had to be music based. Working in the record shop, having done it for a long time, and it generally just being an interest. So, I mean, that sort of qualified me to write a music-based book, I suppose. But background, I was self-taught when I did that first trial run novel. That was the idea of that, was to sort of find out how to do it. I mean, it is that thing, that cliche for a reason, that you're presented with a blank page, and how do you do it? But I think it's important, if you're going to start anything like that, you have to know, at least have an idea of where you want the ending to go. You can change it completely, but that will build up who comes into the story, why they come into the story. Every little thing has to be relevant towards where you're getting to, really. So, I think that answers the question.
Yeah, no, it's good. I was reading. Well, I like a podcast called Harmontown, and on it is a guy called Dan Harmon. He has a thing called the Story Circle, which is evolved from Joseph Campbell's kind of the I think it's called Hero Many Faces or something, and it's about how all stories are like or not all stories, but a lot of stories conform to this sort of this thing that he's devised, being the story circle, that it's a really fascinating thing. I don't know if I can show it to you, but yeah, it's the hero's journey is always like a trial from the unknown into the known into the unknown, and it crosses these thresholds, and all these it breaks down into these 8 points.
Okay.
Has that had any influence on how you do your writing, or do you know of that? Is that something that's sort of common?
I don't know of it, and not really. I wouldn't say it influences it, but it does remind me of. Did you have those build your own adventure books when you were a kid? And I love those things. They're really frustrating because the book can finish as soon as it's got started, because you choose the wrong adventure, I suppose.
Yeah.
But, it sounds a little bit like that. But in terms of actually sort of building the story by bullet points, I suppose for the second one, the reason why it worked out much better is because I was just more prepared.
Yeah.
So in a similar sort of way, I just had my pile of notes. And so you start each day, you know exactly what you're going to do, and then it's good to, when you're finished doing the chapter you want to do, to then spend the rest of the day thinking about, right, I'm going to start off even bits of dialogue, bits of setting the scene, the first thing that you want the reader to see in a new chapter. And then, so in the same way that when you're doing a novel, you want the beginning and the end totally sorted, so you know what the journey is going to be. Even just having each chapter like that, approach as a short story each day, and it seems to work. It worked for me.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's how I did it.
Do you sort of take a period of time off and just commit to like just a sort of savage writing schedule, or is it a more sort of backgroundy thing that you kind of do when you can?
Short stories, which is what I've worked on basically since that novel was finished.
Yeah.
That's fine to do that. You can dip in and out of them. But when it was doing the novel, and because I was so dedicated to it, it was the ambition that I wanted to achieve at that time, so it had to be done. And also, once you've started telling people that that's what you're going to do, you don't want to then turn around and be kind of like, yeah, it didn't really work out for me, to be honest. So it was just what I did each day, yeah. So in exactly that way, ready to start by 9 o'clock each day, treat it like a job.
Yeah.
Fortunately, that job was then finished by about 1 o'clock. So then you have lunch. Go and do something. I actually got into gardening because it's a great thing to do. You're not thinking about anything else. So whilst you're doing whatever you're doing in the garden, you can then just totally focus on what's going to be the next thing. And I had my phone and was filling it with notes. And then, you're just ready for the next bit. Preparation is great when writing. It's important. Otherwise, you can easily get lost and think, where is this going to go next?
Yeah.
But, I'm fortunate, maybe. I just I haven't been confronted by that. So, yeah.
Yeah. So you don't get struck by sort of writer's block, and you know, I as a musician, I'm in a terrible drought of writer's block, and every time I come to try and write anything, it's just like, this doesn't happen. But everybody I've spoke to has all these different sort of ways that they deal with writer's block, and you know, like I probably use this podcast really as motivation to try and rid that from myself, really.
Yeah, good thing. Let's do that.
So are you free of it?
Well, it's more about the times in between. You know, if you've been out a few nights in a row, if you've been having too good a time doing other stuff, then you can lose momentum. Momentum is a great thing in anything. I suppose for you, I don't know, if you've done a few gigs and you get good feedback, you want to get straight on to it, I imagine, and it's kind of there's your motivation. So, but taking yourself away from it can blow any kind of momentum and motivation. I mean, motivation for me isn't the problem. It is just sitting down and doing it. It's kind of actually thinking, right, this is I'm gonna do this. I mean, a really good example of that, and I don't think I've mentioned this to you actually, but I did a sequel to the Booyah story.
Oh, awesome.
It was on the anniversary. It's called When the Last Leaves Fall, and you can find it on the website. I don't know how Matt Baker does it on the One Show and stuff, but he just points his finger and the name of the website will come up. I don't know if you can do that. It would be really handy. But so it's and that I put a lot of pressure on myself. That's the most pressured, or the only time really that I felt pressured when writing, is because I'd said I wanted to do this story on the anniversary. I'd announced it. Yeah. And I'd started it, but I didn't know that. I'm going to contradict myself. I didn't know what the ending was going to be because I was just making it up as it went along. I won't mention which character's story it was because I think it's quite worthy for a real bumbling effort of a sequel. And so it's only a short story, sort of almost novella length, but it's When the Last Leaves Fall. So, I was 3 chapters in, and I'd announced it and said first chapter's coming up tomorrow. Yeah. And I didn't know how many. I thought it would probably run to about 10 chapters, and it was so a constant case of catching up with where I was. So I had the second chapter ready to go, but that meant I had to edit it the night before and then start what was then going to be the 4th chapter. Then the 3rd chapter's up ready. You see how it sort of went on, and eventually I was only a chapter ahead, and it had to come up because I started doing them daily. If you then have a break in between, it was just rubbish. But well, not the story. The story's ace. But
Yeah.
it's all right. It's a bit throwaway, actually, if I'm totally honest.
Oh no.
Because that's how it was done. But it was a nice little celebratory thing.
Yeah.
So and I really wanted to do it, and did get it done, and didn't miss a day.
No,
But
that sounds excellent. I was kind of imagining that was the end of that. I don't want to do any spoilers. I'll try and avoid them. But I kind of imagined that tale would sort of come to an end. So I will be glad to see that there's a bit more, because I genuinely reached the end and I was just like, oh no, and it kind of came quickly as well, because I was, you're at one point in the story, and then I'm just trying to avoid spoiling the story too much. But yeah, it's good.
It is something that frustrates me in other novels, where the story is done and then you've got another 2-3 chapters afterwards, and there was a bit more of the story I wanted to tell, which was the bit that was open for me. I kind of knew what wanted to happen, what I wanted to happen, and I had there's a very clear image. I don't think it gives anything away, of the child running away towards the clearing at the end, when all of your lovely listeners and watchers get to that bit.
Yeah.
I was just really proud. Every time I came to edit it, I actually would just well up, because it was the conclusion, because I knew it was coming.
Yeah.
Of course, because I'd written it. So it's that image. But yeah, when other novels do it, when they sort of go on a bit, and then they all go away on holiday and everyone has a nice time.
Yeah.
I don't see why you need to know what they do afterwards. This is oh, I almost gave away spoil. Yeah, carry on.
It's really hard to dance around
Yeah.
when you're talking about something. It's very hard to dance around it, isn't it? And I really don't want to spoil that story, because it's, having gone into it knowing nothing, I was all the happier to experience it like that. Spoiler free was lovely.
We'll chat about the ending another time.
Yes, absolutely, yeah. So, what was your first book then? What was that about?
Oh, okay. Well, that was, again, it was an idea that I'd had years before, and I knew the first line of that one. It's a line from a Bible verse, the only Bible verse that's ever really stuck in my head. But for all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. Thought it's a good place to start a book, because then it opens up all kinds of excuses of why people could be sinning and whatever.
Yeah.
And but it's not that you can then sin and ask for forgiveness. It's just that we do all sin and whatever. So that was the idea of that book, and it was supposed to have. It was originally called The Axis. It was supposed to be this good and evil thing, and it does work, and it is good, but it's it is good. Can I say that? Yeah, I've got faith in it. It's great.
It's good.
It's good. So it's maybe a bit serious. I think maybe that's the trap that you fall into when that one falls into when doing a first novel, is that you try and take it all a bit too seriously, and that definitely came across with that. So, but the story idea, in actually answering your question, is a schoolboy's trip away from a public school, so they go on a break, and it's it got two stories running parallel. This is where it didn't quite work, is because this is what I was taking too seriously, and even though I understood it, other people who did sort of proofread it or just saw what I was up to didn't really get it.
Right.
And it ties together towards the end, but a lot of people would have lost interest by then. But I didn't have an editor for that, as I did with Booyah's story.
Yeah.
So maybe you'd have to cut a lot of it out, and I might come back to it one day. It's actually based in South America, a schoolboy's trip over to South America now. But I've got some notes to actually base it down your way. I think it would just be easier.
Yeah.
To have a sort of Cornish schoolboys trip, and all kinds of things go down in Cornwall. So
anything goes in Cornwall.
Anything goes. Yeah. Maybe you can. I don't know. Be a sort of consultant on that one.
Yeah, Cornish consultant.
Yeah. I love it. But yeah, and again, I knew the ending and got there, and I knew that the last line, if I ever finish it, I think this just has to stick. The last line was, without his glasses, he did look a little bit like Superman. And it's great, isn't it?
Yeah.
really. Yeah, I don't know. It was just that was where I wanted to head to with that one. Yeah, without his glasses, it's something like that. Anyway, it
Do,
mentioned Superman. Superman's the last word of that book.
do you think in terms of like what sort of thematically you would like to explore during each book? Do you have like a sort of idea of is it that in depth when you sort of break an idea for a story? Do you sort of go as even as deep as like I would like to try a sort of thematically quite different way of telling a story, or a different sort of like do you know what I mean? Like there's
Yeah, I know what you're
yeah
saying. I really thought about it that deeply. Maybe in a short story,
yeah
maybe if you really try to get a message across quickly, which is sort of what you have to do with short stories. But not with that first one where I wanted it to be good, evil. It's not really good versus evil, but it's the influence that good can have on people whilst evil's attacking, and redemption a little bit maybe came into it. I don't really recall, to be honest.
yeah.
But so that definitely had it. I don't purposefully do that. That's not a challenge. The short stories I quite like to just sort of keep light-hearted.
Yeah.
But maybe I'll try it to keep a sort of theme going. I can't think of any examples anyway where I've really deliberately.
But could you
gone out.
go back and retrospectively look at them and say I can sort of see where the subconsciously the theme of this has kind of gone, or is that just something that just kind of is that something that happens in the sort of retrospective? You just look back and see, like I can sort of see where when I've written songs I can sort of see, maybe that I've been influenced by something at a time, and then it's that I'm writing something sort of similar, and I kind of try and explore that sort of space.
Yeah. I don't really know. It's what was it? I just totally lost my thread then because I was quite interested in what you were saying about the songwriting. So it's cool. Let's talk about you. Yeah, it's kind of it's totally gone.
No, that's
Sorry.
okay. That's all right. So I mean, what I was just thinking about sort of the themes and stuff like that, and those kind of influences. When you've sort of started your experience, started your writing, what was your experience of the sort of writing industry and how that all works? How's that kind of worked for you? Do you sort of self-publish, or have you sort of got much people involved in what you do?
Yeah, I approached publishers, but it was there's a whole another really long convoluted conversation about that, but it just wasn't going to work out using British publishers for that story or American publishers from that story because of where I'm from and what I was writing about. It's kind of it wouldn't have sat prettily with any of them, I don't think. So they are self-published, and the other short stories are up on the website now, and that's where I put them. But I haven't posted a story for quite a long while. Because I've been working on plenty of other stuff that I can't really talk about. But I will give you an exclusive because I wanted to be able to give you something, which is I'm going to be putting a new short story up there soon. I've started it.
Oh, excellent.
Cool. It's got the working title of Ugly Fathers with Pretty Daughters. But I kind of like that. Title came first for that one.
Yeah, I like it. That's good.
Thank you very much. I'm making my family proud. But I took the father out of the story, so it can't really be called that now. So I think it's just going to be called About a Girl, something like that.
Yeah.
But it's nice. And so sorry. The thematic thing. I remember what I was going to say now.
Yeah.
So it's if I'm reading something at the time, that can definitely influence a story.
Yeah.
So I've been reading lots of Murakami recently, and I just love the way that he writes. They're simple stories. They don't really try and challenge you too much. And again, I don't think much of a theme really runs through his stories. I think that they're just very easy to read and likable characters, and you sort of you know what they're about. He's great at characterization, so that definitely influences stories. And so this next one that I'm going to do, Ugly Fathers with Pretty Daughters, is gonna have a sense of that about it. So it's the way that he writes, where I just like the way he ends stories. I just read one recently, and all it does was it finishes with a bonfire on the beach, and well, the whole story is about this bonfire on the beach. But
Brilliant.
I finished it and just had to say, wow, it was a wow ending without really having an ending. And he's great at just stopping stories, just stone dead. And so yeah, that it's not really a theme, but it's an influence.
Yeah.
And that can be true of other writers. There's another story on the website called Kingdom. Someone lent me a book, 1,000 Years of Solitude, by Marquez, and it's just bonkers. It's just absolutely mad, and that really appeals to the way I want to write. The way I sort of, if I deliberately go out to try and alter my voice, or just try and make it more lighthearted, or more of a kind of actually sort of trying to make an impact with what I'm saying, then that then maybe not so. I wouldn't do that sort of light-hearted thing, but that definitely appealed to the way that I like to write. And so I went out and did Kingdom, trying to be like that, and people have generally quite liked that story. It's quite a long story, a long short story. So yeah, I was going to say I'd recommend it, but I've got to be careful what I say, I suppose. Can you recommend yourself?
Yeah,
I would recommend that one.
Yeah, you can definitely recommend yourself. Yeah, I'm.
Cool.
So can you download these all from your these? Do you buy them on your site, or how do you get access to them?
They're all up there just for free. It's just where's Matt Baker when you need him doing his...
Yeah, I know. We can. I'll see if I can juggle some links and stuff. Yeah,
mate. Dermot does it too as well, doesn't he? He gets phone numbers and all sorts.
Yeah.
Anyway,
they've got a bigger staff than I have.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah, cool. Maybe you should work on that. I mean, the impact that something like that could have.
It could be big.
Can't underestimate it. The website is www.phillip with two L's drown.com.
Yeah.
And that's where you just find all the stories for free. There's also, I started doing little blogs on my writing experience, why I wrote, and sort of the stuff that we're talking about now. But I didn't really feel that is something that I didn't feel qualified to advise other people how to write, because I haven't been taught, so I can only show people the way that I've done it.
Yeah.
But I can't say it's the right way or the wrong way. I wouldn't ever try and tell someone how to do it, but I'd say this is how I do it. It works for me.
Yeah.
Maybe it'll work for you too. So there are some of those on there. The ones that are the blog posts that I do, they're actually more popular than the short stories, which is kind of a bit of a knife in the guts. But it's little short stories or true tales from the record shop that I work in as well, because it attracts some strange people. As I'm sure after gigs you have people coming up to you and they're so you're taking a bit too much of my time now, and so these are little stories about those. They're called tales from a record shop.
Nice.
And they're really good fun to write because they require very little editing or thought. It's just telling something that genuinely happened and embellishing it quite a lot.
Yeah.
So yeah, but they're good fun, and that's all on the website.
Excellent.
For free, just give it away. So
So one of the things that I talk about is like how you do engaging with your audience and community building, and kind of, you know, like how your interaction with sort of your fans works. How does have you sort of do you do much to sort of build that? I mean, part of blogging and stuff like that is part of that.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
Really, in a nutshell. I mention it to people who are in the shop. There was a nice word of mouth thing actually, where people say, you know, someone. I have no problem at all with people lending books. I'm not in it for any kind of, you know, it would be nice to make a little extra cash out of it, but it's not why I'm in it at all. So if someone lends someone a book and then they enjoy it, then I'm very happy for them to just pass it on again. And I've left books out places, and I was somewhere in London yesterday just by Embankment, and there's a really nice little row of benches, so I'm definitely going to go up there with a rucksack full of books and just on a Sunday sometime just leave them out there or post it on each of them saying like
enjoy.
Cheers. And yeah, absolutely. And I'm just as happy to do that really than anything. I love the idea of that. And when I was in Falmouth, when I think it must have been either the weekend that the book came out, which was 2015. So we were on a family trip down there, and we were in Falmouth, and I did that, dotted the books around, and I mean, I'm no good at social media, and I'm not really fond of it, but it's a nice thing to be able to say, free book out here. So when I go to that place near Embankment, just but what's that thing they do with the art, the free art hashtag, or free art Thursdays or something like that, and people leave art places.
That's brilliant. No, I don't know about that.
It's good. It's worth looking up, and you get some really good things as well. So I don't know if it's exclusive to a town or any place in particular, but it's a really cool thing, and that definitely inspired that. And if you just put hashtag free book, I'm sure someone's going to find that.
Yeah.
People love free things, and so yeah, that's that's the only promoting I've really done, is giving things away for free.
Yeah.
So, but it's yeah, I need to work on the business side of things if I really want to do something. But the website is just to sort of keep people entertained, and the thought behind it is, if someone enjoys one of the short stories and likes the way that I write, even though it's in a completely different tone than the sort of detailed and maybe quite flowery way that I do some Booyah, that might lead them to the book.
Yeah.
So I think I took down all the sort of links to buy it here, but actually changed it to just get in touch if you want one.
Yeah.
So if your listeners and readers want one, then get in touch through the website or through you, whatever. And donations or even just cover the postage cost doesn't go astray.
Yeah, that's lovely. That's a really good. I mean, one of the things that often ruins your hobby is when you financialize it. I'm not sure that's a word, but like, do you know what I mean? As soon as you start making it try and make you money, like,
yeah,
I used to love performing all the time. I would do it for anywhere. I didn't care. I didn't matter. And then as soon as I started getting paid for it, I was like, oh well. Do you know what I mean? It just immediately, like, it changes the entire arrangement, doesn't it? And you suddenly become very different. You start monetizing your time, and it's just a really crap way to be a creative. You know, it's sort of a it's a bit killer.
It's really true. I remember how I felt I was just a bit gutted when. I think it was the first Reading I was going to, Reading Festival, where Chili Peppers were headlining. They were the big headliners, and I really wanted to see them, never seen them before. And it turned out that they demanded, I think it was £1 million each to turn up. And it's we all really want to see you, and surely you really want to play your music. But, you'll only turn up for that much, really? And I'm sure you make enough as it is. And
it's bad, isn't it?
It really is, and that's when they were making real money out of album sales as well. So you have a single in the charts, you get £4 million over a weekend or whatever if it sells really well, and then they demand that for one night only. 2 hours. They were great. So they were worth
you would hope so, wouldn't you? You would hope so. You'd be very disappointed if they phoned it in for that.
Yeah, true, absolutely. Yeah. But they were good. But yeah, that whole thing just kind of, I found a bit upsetting, really. Yeah,
it's crap. I mean, it's weird, isn't it? Because you're always in a juxtaposition between, like, this is something that's a dream job for you. I'm just sort of projecting, but for me, like, music is my dream job. I assume it's the same for you with writing, and it'd be amazing to, like, make that your sort of financial, the way that you sort of get paid to do something. That would be the greatest reward. But as soon as that happens, it kind of creates this weird thing where it sort of jams it up by. As soon as people start getting paid for things, it just becomes a bit crap, and I don't know what that is. The human mind it just changes, doesn't it? You just like, oh, it's much harder now. I've got to do it for money.
Yeah. So really, it actually makes it harder. So. Yeah, did you start demanding like massive riders and stuff?
No. I'm happy if they'll let us change somewhere, and I'd have to change in the toilets. If they're like, if you don't have to change in the disabled toilets, I'm like, yeah, we've come up in the world. We're now changing in like the hallway instead or something. It's
the hallway.
It's terrible. Yeah.
Yeah. Sure.
But yeah, it is exactly that. As soon as it becomes a job, it's just weird. It's a weird. It's a weird thing. So since you when you were starting your writing, you were sort of saying about something that was helping you create your story. Is that like a bit of software, or was that some book or something that you were saying about that like sort of gave you lots of hints towards writing? And
Oh, I'm glad you brought that up, actually. So if anyone who is listening or watching this has thought about that, then I reckon you can do as many courses as you like. I'm sure there's some very good ones, and talk to as many people as you like. And personally, I just bought some study books. I think there was a Collins one that was really good. The what are they called? Strunk and White, I think it's called. Theirs is a little writing guide. The Stephen King one is brilliant on writing. It's excellent, and he doesn't try and tell you what to do. He again writes about his experiences, and then just mentions, don't use adverbs too much or proverbs or whatever. Proverbs. Sorry, forget that one, everybody. It was a late night last night.
Yeah, I think we're both suffering today a little bit, aren't we?
Yeah, absolutely, which is fine. It brings out the truth.
Yes.
How unlearned I am. Apparently. Anyway, back to the question. It was so I read a few things, and the Stephen King one's very valid, and the a couple of the writing guides. But anyway, they tell you to do exercises at the end of it. It's kind of, oh man, they were. I read them through cover to cover, but they were a waste of time for me. Maybe someone else will get more out of it. The best thing that you can do is just read. Just keep on reading. I was really fortunate at that time. I'd worked hard to put myself in the position where I could take some time off work and do it. So moved down to the coast and read these study guides and thought, whatever, I'm a bit lost, and you might as well go back to school or university if you're going to use those things. You just got to read and work out. That's how someone ends a chapter. Cool. Yeah. You don't end it of everyone sits down to have dinner. You've got to have the link of, it's like an episode of 24 or something.
Yes, yeah, very much so, isn't it? Yeah.
That's the bookmark for all those things. Absolutely. Jack is, stuck under a bus, and what's going to happen. And that's what you want the end of chapters to be. And you'll see that. Just go out and look for it in books. Those books are published for a reason. More often than not, there's a lot of shite out there too, obvious. But so that's what really did it for me. But Stephen King's on writing, really, really great advice as to how to do it. And he talks about how off his head he was when he was writing too. So he's very honest about he can't remember writing quite a lot of his stuff at one period of his life. I think he just hit 40 or something, and he just started drinking a lot and doing tons of coke. And then, so what did I come up with yesterday? And but so it's frank and it's honest, but that's a great guide, and he'll sort of tell you what to go and look for when you're reading other people's books. So that was it for me.
Does it spoil reading for you, knowing all the tricks? Is it because I like to think I'm a little bit of a sort of film nerd, and and then when I start to watch some films, I just can't stop the critical, analytical mind just going sort of working and seeing the puzzle put together, and you sort of see someone come and you go, well, that's what that's going to be in a minute. That's going to be the thing at the end or whatever. And I just, in some ways, that kind of spoils it a little bit for me. But also, it makes the really good ones shine. It's like,
yeah, definitely. It's exactly that. Can't really embellish it more than that.
No.
I mean, when you think about something like Usual Suspects and all the clues being there, and it was kind of groundbreaking, and it was the guy's debut. It was the first thing he had written, and then he directed it too, and it's kind of a bit of a masterpiece. But you can't watch it twice, and because all of those clues are so
in your face,
defined, isn't it? And I do that. It's there's a story. A short story again, which this is probably the most popular one that I've written feedback-wise, called Love Matters. And, it's going to ruin it for anyone who reads it now, probably, because the clue is in there big time. And if you see it, then you know exactly what's going to happen at the But the clues that you can use in novels that or short stories, the sequel one that I wrote that I told you about, When the Last Leaves Fall, that was actually trying to leave those little keys in there, but not really knowing where it's going. That was part of the challenge that made it really, really tough. So
Yeah.
people who read it, there were a few people who made themselves known to me who read it daily as it came out, and so they missed the fact that I had to go back and change. So there's a bit where there's the back of a pickup truck, and there's I can't remember what was in there first time round, some sheets and some hose or rakes or something. But then I actually went back and put some pickaxe handles in there, because suddenly at the end there's some pickaxe handles, and you can't do what those guys did just with a hoe and a sheet.
Yeah.
So so I went back and changed that one. But it's, yeah, but it's really good fun to do, and that's the thing, that if you're having fun doing it and giving yourself the challenge of doing it too, then little things like that. All right, well, how am I going to make that relevant? Or if it's not relevant at all, then why did I put it in there? It's got to come out, and that makes editing really easy. And that's one of the things that I employed a good editor, a really great editor, to work on my book, and he just said, strip that out. It needed stripping back big time. And any published author, any book that comes out, all of them from their first draft, almost without exception, would lose 10% straight away from the editor. They'll just say, you don't need that in there. It's not really relevant to anything. Good editor will find that stuff to do. And from employing that guy to do it, and it wasn't cheap, but what he told me you can strip back, that's the biggest lesson that I've had.
Yeah.
And again, if someone's doing it to your work, then unless you can justify keeping it in there, and there is a chapter in mine, I only overruled him in a couple of cases where the way that, okay, this is the nerdy stuff, this is the stuff that we all love.
Yeah.
But so the book is written from the oh man, it's totally gone. But it's first person limited, or third person limited. Sorry. So most eponymous novels will be from the point of view of the protagonist, and so everything that we see is only the things that they can see. Anything else, if they can't see it, it shouldn't be in there. But there's a chapter right in the middle of Booyah. He's not involved for the first time throughout the whole novel. He's in every bit. It's his story. It's it's in the title. And he said you can't really do this if you're using third person limited. And I was just adamant. It was my favourite chapter. It's the one where I don't think it gives anything away. You might recall when we're introduced to Alf, so the walking man,
Right.
And I just love it because it's suddenly a whole different tone to the story, and it's that's very deliberate, that the tone that when he enters it, and in my opinion he's a good guy. The whole tone is supposed to change, and that's actually, what is it, 2/3 of the way through, halfway through. And that's supposed to lead you towards the ending. It's suddenly like there's this whole dark thing, and he's not the darkness, but it just sort of
comes in with him.
comes in with him. Yeah, sort of walks into it, and then it sort of drags it all into the story, and that was very deliberate. So with that, I didn't have to justify myself to the editor. He just said take it out because it is self-published. So and that's what self-publishing affords you, is the fact that you're not really answerable to anyone except for you've got to accept the criticism if people say no, you just can't do that. But I can justify that because not just because it's my favourite chapter, because it does create that tone, and if you're looking out for it, then it's deliberate. It's kind of cool. So.
Did you find a lot of, was it hard to let go of some of the stuff when they edit? Is it like losing your babies or whatever? Someone described it as. I can't. Yeah, it can be. I mean, there was originally where the fourth chapter sits was the thing that I researched the most. It was so there's a character at the beginning, Mr. Henry, and it described his background, why they came to live in the deep south in America, his all his training, why he
knew so much about his specialised subject and the fact he was a bit of a sort of prodigy and that anyone would want him working for. And so I really researched the ass out of that, and then the editor just said, no, backstory, it's irrelevant. So the backstory being the obvious thing in that if you're telling people too much rather than letting people read it and discover it, then it's basically considered not necessary, not relevant, and not needed.
Yeah.
So I threw the whole of that out, and I don't really want to do a story about a guy who runs the train network around nationalisation of railways, which is what I was researching. So, yeah, I told you I learned a lot whilst doing it.
Yeah.
Nationalisation of railways. It's boring. So yeah.
It must be fascinating, kind of having to like engulf yourself in a world of research and just become intertwined with it, because the language you use in that book is incredibly, it's incredibly sort of difficult if you. I guess it must be incredibly difficult to write like that all the way through. It's like I must have taken a lot of research how to sort of like say a lot of the phrases, and I was just in awe of how it was written. It was really it kind of just blew my mind a little bit, and it's a bit of a, I don't want to cheese on about how much I liked it, but yeah.
Stop.
Yeah, I will do. It was really good. It was really good, but it's like that is one aspect that was really interesting to me, was like, how do you sort of learn how to write in that writing style? Research.
Research, reading stories set around that place, that time. So things like whilst researching, I was doing exactly that, reading stories from the South and preferably Mississippi. And the one book which has become one of my favourite novels of all time is Gone with the Wind. It's fantastic, and everyone should read it. And it's got really nice dialect in it. But some of the other ones, some of the William Faulkner ones who I mentioned earlier, things like Uncle Tom's Cabin is really great, and it's brutal, and it's around that time and should be read. But they're really good, but they're from people who lived in that area and did it. So that's the way they spoke to each other. So, which is just repeating your point, really. But it was, tough. It was the thing that almost destroyed me ever finishing it, because on each edit I would go through and just focus on dialect.
Yeah.
So I would do edits which were just for the dialect, and then I'd get 2/3 of the way through and think, nah, it's either too cliche or it doesn't work, or and then you'd have to start again, and it was just so I came up with my own dictionary of so if I have a word, this is how they say that word, but there's differences between the whites and the blacks, because that's just the people they were around and surrounded them, they spoke like that, like we all do. But it was a nightmare, and it was a really ambitious project to do this, and I did put my all into it at the time, and I had great fun doing it. But I don't know that I'd ever want to try and accomplish something on that scale again.
Yeah.
Where it's kind of, it was an ambitious starter, even though, as I told you, it wasn't actually the first one, but that was the one that I wanted to get done. That's the one I wanted to show people, and that's the one thing when writing I was thinking, will people be able to read this? And some people have been really kind and said, they like the dialect, and it has to have that. It's like the British soap opera thing, really, I suppose, where they're having a real fierce argument, and it's kind of just say, don't you talk to me like that, you ninny. And it's kind of like, he wouldn't really call me ninny.
No.
So it had to be quite brutal. And obviously there is the thing of where I said it and the time, and what I was looking at when reading other people's stories is the obvious word for African American slang to describe blacks at that time. And one person said it was quite gratuitous, but for that same British soap opera reason, I said, well, it had to do it. If I'm thinking how this character is talking to that character, again, they're not going to call them a ninny. They're going to, like...
give it full bore.
Yeah, absolutely. So
It's more grit. It's more real and gritty because of it, isn't it? And like,
mm,
it must have been a difficult decision to sort of, but it has to
yeah,
be. It has to be like that, doesn't it? For
it's
it
a
to,
story I chose to tell,
yeah,
and that's why, again, I don't think I'd approach anything like that really again, because it didn't. Yeah, I wasn't comfortable at times writing it, but when you're actually writing it, you're immersed in it. It's the proofreading when
yeah,
it's kind of, wow, okay, all right, twice on a page, or
yeah,
but only one person said it's gratuitous. Everyone else, I think, agreed that it was generally um, a necessary evil, really.
yeah,
So yeah, but
yeah.
it's
A harsh reflection of a different era, isn't it?
yeah,
It's
yeah, very much so.
um, yeah. No, it was good. Yeah, it was very good.
Good, thanks.
Did you? Yeah, not the use of that, but like, it was very, very good, jolly good. In Cornwall, we applaud that language.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right. I've heard about you guys.
yeah. So did
No,
you?
it's yeah.
I
It's
was
fine.
just, I
Sorry.
was just going to say, did you learn? What did you learn from writing this book that you would try and use for your next book?
Good question. Um, Maybe editing more as I go along.
Yeah,
Um, Finish a chapter rather than going out and you know um, working outside or whatever I enjoyed doing, going for a real long walk and thinking about what comes next. Maybe actually going back and editing what you've just done
yeah,
or what I've just done when it's still fresh. But it's maybe that's something I'd do, but it's actually, I think, quite good to step away from it and come back and look at it again. Again, I think that's in Stephen King's book where he says that he'll write a chapter, edit it, and that's how he works. But I haven't done it that way, so maybe it's not for me. But maybe I should try it. If I was doing dialect like that again, definitely, so you don't have to go through the whole thing really painstakingly,
yeah.
making sure you got it all right. What did I learn that I'd put in whilst actively doing it? I don't really know. Just I do think it's important to just get things down. So even if you don't think a sentence is going to stay, if you're not quite happy with how it's worded, don't focus on that stuff at all. Who was it recently? I heard someone say that the first draft is actually just a draft of the first draft. So, which makes absolute sense. So you're getting all these ideas down. It's almost note taking, but in a sort of creative form. And I like that because it doesn't put pressure on you to be perfect the first time around.
No,
Because
you're sort of filling in the dark spaces around the story, aren't you? Almost to kind
yeah,
of
right.
give you, the ideas for later, for colouring it in as you were, or whatever.
Yeah, I think that sounds about right. Yeah.
Yeah,
And I wouldn't want to do anything that takes the joy away from it. It's my passion. I do love doing it. Even if I've not been as active lately with sharing stuff, it's I come up with story ideas all the time. Some days where just scribbled on bits of paper, I've got a whole box folder just full of ideas. Some are titles, some are little snippets, or even just dialogue. And it's something to draw from. So going back to the question about creative block, writer's block, I haven't really experienced that because I've had it where something isn't working, but you just either leave it or plow on with it and then come back and say, what was I trying to say? That's where it's the draft of the first draft.
Yeah.
But you don't throw anything. I think there's one thing that I have thrown, but I still want to finish that story one day, and I only started it in about 2008, so
nearly time.
nearly time. Yeah, it's a great story idea, and I think it's a really good idea. That so much so that I can't actually really share it, but I'll tell you sometime because it's I love the idea of it, and it's got a beautiful twist at the end. So
Nice.
don't really know why I bothered sharing that because it's actually saying nothing.
So, do you think that you would like to do sort of TV, or would you like to take any of your stories to sort of film? Or would that be interest to you, or?
Again, it's not a motivation for writing it, but I suppose and a lot of people have said about how visual it reads,
Yeah.
how visually it reads, and that they can really picture what's happening. Um, so, I mean, I suppose in a way I have fantasized about what it would be like to sit there and watch it, but I don't think I'd be that comfortable with it too, because no one would see Booyah like I see him. No one would
No.
see him like you see him.
Yeah.
And I was having this conversation with a friend recently, and you know, some characters, the guy, the what's he called, the deputy, at the beginning of the story, being careful what I say,
Yeah.
Jacob Helland, he he's the only one who's really based on someone. It's you know, the movie Cool Hand Luke, the overseer on the road with the reflective sunglasses.
Right.
And I really pictured him as being just like that.
Yeah.
He's the only one. But you know, that film was made in what, early '60s, so he's not around anymore.
No.
So he couldn't be cast in that role. But
CGI.
CGI, do it definitely. All he has to do is turn and glare. But I don't know. It would be too weird a thing. It's a good hypothetical question. I suppose I would be interested in having some kind of involvement if it were to come to it, but I haven't deliberately written for TV. I know a few people who actually I've sort of been introduced to, but haven't met yet, who do, and it will be interesting to meet them, which I will do sometime soon.
Yeah, you can almost imagine it being like you know, like these like Netflix 8-hour, like 45-minute or whatever, 45-minute episodes, 8 hours or 8 episodes or whatever that, you know. I could just sort of, something like that would be quite cool. Like, so you could give the story I almost find films, and we were sort of saying this before about, like, you know, for me, films are a little bit too short, so you kind of see all the keys coming up, and you sort of see all the little bits that you flag up, and I just feel it's not enough incidental stuff that happens. So
Yeah.
these like longer form shows are, in my head, a little bit, give you a bit more time to explore that stuff, and I think like a book can be really nicely broken down into those kind of bigger spaces.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think for a story like that, it would be. That's how. Again, when I've sort of pictured it, I think that would be the way that I'd want it to go too. Because things that I've seen like that, I suppose Roots would be the one which is most sort of that you could assimilate it to, and they did it really well. There's so much story to tell. It's a massive novel, and mine's not short either. So it's yeah, I can see that. Yeah.
I don't know how that sort of gets happening, but I don't know how you sort of transition into doing that. I don't know whether or not you can just, do people just buy your screenplay, or do they go, I want to like option this book, can you write a screenplay from it?
Well, that does happen, people optioning books, but I think that it happens a lot. But I think that's with the really popular books. I know a guy who works for a record company, and he's really passionate about this book. This is going to be a useless story because I can't remember what the book is, but he said about this guy's written another book who in the 70s he sold the option to make the film of it in for £1.
Right.
And so this guy I know who works for the record company, he really loves what this guy. He loves the way he writes. It's very 70s science fiction or fantasy or something like that, and but based on computer games, and it's all his interests. And so he heard about this guy selling options for his thing for £1, and the guy from the record company is also a filmmaker, and so he went back to the guy and said, "I'll give you £1 to option this one." And he said, "Yeah, all right, yeah, I'll take it." So. That's a great thing, but I think I'd value my work a little more highly than
Slightly higher.
Even to get it made. Well, I don't know. If someone wanted to make it, then probably, you know, it's going back to what we say about monetizing this stuff. I'd much rather more people read it and hopefully enjoy it.
Yeah.
Than haggle over £1.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Is there any so what's your sort of next what's your next thing? Have you got something in the pipeline? Is there some
Well, I've got lots of things in the pipeline that just don't necessarily involve writing at the moment.
Yeah.
I am quite busy, but there will be some more short stories coming soon. At some point, I've held back a few short stories, which at some point I would really like to put into an anthology. Just have something that can sit on my bookshelf alongside the other book. That's another ambition. It's just to have something else. In terms of doing another novel, I've got 3 or 4 plotted ones, but I'd want that space away again to be able to do that, where I can just write on it every day. Otherwise, it's all too consuming. You can't do anything else, and I'm having a good time at the moment. So it's kind of, I don't want to sort of give my life away again to do that, that sort of thing.
You know the darkness with which you have to get to kind of get it out.
Yeah. You've got to become quite reclusive. It is a solitary thing. Yeah. But if I was doing it full time, that would be fine. You can do both. But at the moment, working on quite a few other things and quite important things too. So it was, but what's coming next? Well, definitely Ugly Fathers with Pretty Daughters. That's going to be out there soon.
Cool.
And not a lot else I can really share at the moment.
But, no, okay. Watch this space then, I guess.
Yeah, and I'm feeling very creative. Well, I don't really turn that off. So when I was in London yesterday, I was just standing there staring at a black cab driver, and this is sort of the genesis of stories. This is how they start. So talking about story ideas coming from anywhere and having multiple ones in a day. He was just sitting there looking down at something, and my mind immediately clicks into places to what's he doing? Like, what would his story be? And you don't want to know what I came up with his story. Believe me. But yeah, so I won't turn that off. But short stories, I'm enjoying them too much to not continue doing those at the moment. I would put a lot of pressure on myself to do a novel, which is a shame, and I do want to go back and set that one that I said was in South America in Cornwall. I think that could work, but it might mean stripping out
stuff
and just writing it again. So that is the same as starting a new novel, really. I think that's fair. But then ask me again in a week.
Yeah, it's in flux.
All changed.
Yeah.
So, which I think is fair enough. If you're doing that,
it's good. I mean, it's a good way to be, isn't it? Sort of open to what happens. See how you feel.
I think so. I hope so. What about you with music? Are you going to be putting anything out there soon at all, or
we are in like a bit of a dark place with our album. we have reached a very dark place with our album. So yeah, I don't know. It's happening slowly, and we did something when I first joined the band in 2013, and we didn't really do anything else for a long time, and then we started sort of talking about recording about a year ago, and gently started easing it forwards. But we're it's just time, and it's actually quite a lot of pressure to kind of do something quite good. That's quite hard, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I don't know. The first album was like very unprofessionally made. It was made by a guy who's a professional, but it wasn't. We did it very quickly, and it was just kind of like we've got 6 sessions in the studio, and it's got to be done. We've got this much money, and it has to be finished. This is the start. This is the end, and it will be finished. Whereas this one, we haven't done that, and the limitless possibilities is actually like a bit of a sort of a double-edged sword, really, because it could be potentially amazing, and some of it is amazing, but that is quite crippling. So.
Yeah, sure. And it goes back to exactly what you were saying about as soon as there's money involved, you're just writing songs, let's go out and play them, just wherever, on the beach. Then
it's different.
Happy days.
It's a different thing entirely. Yeah, it's Yeah.
Yeah, interesting.
I'll be excited to see if it ever happens. If it finishes, I'm sure it will get finished, and I'm sure it will make a lot of us unhappy, especially myself.
It will make lots of people unhappy, but think of the people that you can make happy, though.
I know. It will make probably other people happy, but it will probably make us as a band quite miserable. So,
Right. Okay.
so yeah,
Yeah.
it's good. It's good. It's good to yeah. It's all very exciting.
It goes to show, doesn't it? Like, who would be creative when you've got to sacrifice yourself all the time? And
Yeah.
I've thought about this, and you hear about musicians. We think it's a glamorous life, bands on the road, touring all year. So I went to go and see Angus and Julia in London last night, and they were saying about, they're away from their homes all the time, 250 days a year. 250 days a year. I mean, could you?
It's too much, isn't it? It's too much.
All of it work, you've got to have a job, but that's the job they've chosen, and it is much. Imagine if your job took you just away from home, and it's so creative life. Yeah, if you work a 9 to 5, you go home every day and you get your whatever it is, 28 days holiday.
Yeah, I can't even imagine what that's like anymore. But when I had almost that, I hated it. And I wanted this. I wanted this more than anything. And now I've got this. I'm like 9 to 5 would be amazing. Like weekends off. Wow, that sounds
Weekends off.
beautiful.
Yeah, of course. It's it's a cool thing, isn't it? But yeah, funny.
My girlfriend just experienced for the first time what it's like. We did 3 gigs this weekend, so she was over all weekend, and she sort of saw how the sausage was made. She sort of saw what it did to me. Like Friday, I'm sort of preemptively concerned that I'm going to lose my voice because it's the beginning. So I'm like, and so I get in late, and so late nights lead to like sort of lazy mornings, and just everything.
Yeah.
The whole thing just kind of rolls into this like sleep, eat, perform, and it's really quite disappointing. It's not as rock. You see backstage, and you go backstage, and you think backstage is actually just this really shit bit that they just kind of like they just put bands in, and you think, wow, what's backstage going to be like? Backstage is rubbish.
Amazing. Oh, because where you were, there were people like I saw Jake Bugg was playing. And
Pixie
stuff.
Lot, and some people. I didn't see any of those people. I was in a different area, and it just we played 1 year. We did a thing called Bands in the Sands, and Billy Ocean played, and we were getting changed. We were the support for Billy Ocean. We were getting changed, and the security came in and went, "Billy's coming in. You need to get out."
No way, with your trousers around your ankles.
Get out of here! It's like, we just
That's
played.
amazing.
It's like, you got to get out. Billy will not have anyone else in this change.
Billy will not have it. That's amazing. That's a really cool story, though.
Yeah,
So,
but I don't know if it's Billy or whether or not it's just the security, just like, yeah, out you go, just out you go. So
yeah, true. Maybe a bit of both.
yeah. Billy won't have it.
Billy won't have it. That is absolutely amazing. I love it. Yeah, and in all fairness, I'd probably give any room I was into Billy Ocean as well, I reckon.
Yeah,
So
there you
I think
go.
he did the right thing there.
I think we were the bigger men, weren't we?
I think you were the bigger man. Yeah, I completely agree. Very cool.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you very much, Philip. That's
No worries.
thank you so much for coming on. It's a
Thanks for
real pleasure. I'm really glad you introduced me to your book, and thank you for joining us. I'll put little links so that people can kind of check out where to check out your stories and check out
Thank
your
you.
short stories. I'd highly recommend The Reputation of Booyah Carthy. Excellent book.
Cheers, Dan. Thanks for having me on, and thanks you for your kind words about the book. And
Yeah, you're most welcome.
it's really nice. Yeah, people have been kind, and I suppose people don't really come up to you and sort of say, "Yeah, all right, mate. Yeah, your book was shite." So it's
yeah.
I don't know. There must be some out there because but there are, but people just don't come and tell you that. But it's nice to know that you enjoyed it.
Yeah,
So,
no, it was
good.
very good. And if you've got anything that you want to come on back on and talk about, you'd be more than welcome. So
Oh, wait, I'd come again.
yeah, cool. All right then. Well, thanks very much. This has been the Noise Filter podcast. We will catch you again. Cheerio. Goodbye. Bye.